So how many people here think that they have enough developers on their team? You know? Yeah? Can't. No, nobody's hands up. I guess based on what Sylvain said with the new .jobs, I think that's probably a problem that most of us have. So I'm here today to talk to you about how you can scale your team from 2 to 10x. And it's something, it's been my lifelong passion, which is try to make the developers productive. And I'm going to give you some secret sauce after about 19 years of doing this full time. So why do I think this is important? I think it's important because all of the ideas you have in your heads are only going to come to reality if you can scale your teams and actually get people to build it. So I've been on this journey for a while, and I think one of the first turning points for me was as I was part of the Eclipse project, I actually had to write a book on it. So this was about 10 years ago. Don't go out and buy it. It's probably a bit stale by now. But the main point is, you know, I'd been on this team for about 5 years, and we'd been spending so much time at the office building out this awesome platform that we thought was going to be hailed by, you know, millions of developers around the world. If you guys remember about the old days of Java, componentization was really important, so we spent a lot of time on OSGI, which is making Java scalable, so a lot of developers can participate and build on the same platform. And you know what happened the first time we gave this book to our editor? He cut it in half, sliced it in half. He threw it away. He said, guys, this is crazy. This is crazy, because you know what's crazy is you took half the book to get people set up and started. You took half of a 500-page book just to get people to you know, build a Hello World example. So this was pretty crushing for me. You know, I think we'd spent so much time on the insides, the internals of this platform, and thinking that we're making everyone productive. But it turns out that once you get onto the outside and you actually start using this as a developer, there were so many little steps in the way that got in the way. And it really hit me hard. I was really disappointed, you know, after spending all this energy. So from 250 pages, I'm going to show you a bit of what it meant to be a developer. You know, the first thing you do when you try and build on a platform is you always have a wizard. So everybody's nailed that pretty well. The second thing is you end up hunting for event IDs, webhook IDs, REST URLs, and you usually get that wrong. So you end up restarting your app all the time because you're like, oh, what was that ID again? I forgot it. I Googled it. The next important thing is you're going to probably, you know, figure out how to export and install this. So you've got to test the thing that you're writing. Like, how do I try this stuff out with real data? Do I have to create a test harness to create some real data sets? So that takes another couple of hours. Then every one of your good ideas, you want to share it with someone. You know, you don't want to use it by yourself. You want to share it. So how do I do that? Do I have to create a web server and export my jar somewhere? How do I get feedback? That's a complete waste of time as well. And then how do I, in my product, if I love a great idea that someone's built, how do I fork it without having to go find what source it is? Is it on GitHub and on Bitbucket? How do I go do that? So there's a huge amount of things that get in the way of being a productive developer. And you know what's worst is, you know, my 12-year-old son a couple of weeks ago asked me how he could write an add-on for Minecraft. And I Googled up. I'd actually never written one. And I'm like, I have to install Maven, the Java SDK? And I'm like, you don't have enough time. Go to bed, son. So unfortunately, a lot of the products that you're building don't ship with an IDE. So we were lucky in Eclipse. We actually shipped with the IDE, and we still had all these constraints. So imagine having to figure out what IDE to install, or Sublime Text Editor, find the source, and it goes on and on and on. So what's really interesting about this is a lot of the pain with being a developer is not just writing the code, but all of the stuff around the code. So a couple of years ago, we went on an experiment and iterated to see, could we make this better? And we were inspired by a concept called pretotyping. And pretotyping is a shorthand word of pretendotyping. And the idea was inspired by a gentleman called Jeff Hawkins, who was actually one of the co-founders of Palm. And he came up with the idea of, before actually building the Palm Pilot, he built a small mock-up out of a piece of wood. He put a piece of paper on it, drew the UI, and he kept it in his pocket for a couple of weeks. And what he did is, whenever he had a meeting, he pulled out his fake Palm Pilot and looked at it and said, booked a meeting, put it back in his pocket. So what he was trying to do is really great, is he was trying to, ahead of actually developing it, trying out to see if it was going to work or not. You know? Because a lot of times, all of your ideas, you'll spend so much time trying to figure out how to build it without even deciding if it's even useful to be built. So when we think about developer productivity, imagine how productive developers could be if they could test out their ideas ahead of time or without having all the constraints of having actually to build it and install it and share it. So this is what we try to do, is what's the software equivalent of prototyping? Well, there's three main concepts that we wanted to encapsulate in prototyping in the software world. The first one was something that you can use in your day-to-day life. And how do you do that? So imagine something that you can use in the day-to-day life of your product. The second thing is zero install setup steps. So this is basically shipping with an IDE, so I don't have to find the source. So how do we make it so there's zero install? And the third thing is using with real data is super important. So what did we do? Well, we were inspired a bit by browser extensions. So what we did is we wanted to make a system, and our goal was that everyone in the company could actually write some code and basically ship it to production and share it with their friends within the company so that our ideas can come out and we can make developers productive. So what we did, and this is something that all of you can do, is we took a framework and a stack of open source components and we embedded them in our products. And the idea was basically everyone could write a snippet of JavaScript, which was stored on the server. Every add-on was stored in a Git repository on the server. We used JGit. So what this meant is that all these kind of browser extensions were now shared on the server. And they were served up on the client side and executed, and you can enable them for different users. So what was great about this is it also shipped with the IDE. So what you were able to do is basically create an add-on, click edit, and write some code and see how it worked, and everybody was collaborating on it. Now, this was so easy that the founder of Atlassian, during a hackathon, actually wrote about 50 lines of JavaScript. And his idea was he'd love it if one of our projects went into projector mode, which you'd basically take a page. So this is the actual snippet of code that he wrote. You take a page, you hide a bunch of elements on the page, and you make everything bigger, which is basically what you want to do when you're projecting your presentation. So you can see here that basically the editor opened up, so there's no looking for source code. The skeleton was created ahead of time. And you did still have to hunt for IDs, but at least you can write the code, and you basically just push it to the server. There's JGit, and it gets served up automatically. Now, the other thing that we added, which was really great, is you can actually fork the add-ons on the server. So since they were stored in JGit on the server, if you liked an add-on that you'd been using, but you want to tweak it, again, zero setup cost, and no IDE to be installed. You just fork it. It gets forked on the server, and you can go ahead and use it. Now, this was a huge success, Like, basically, we had designers, project managers, founders who were basically hacking code now with zero setup costs. They didn't need a 250-page book to get them started. But I think that the previous speaker would probably have a bit of a heart attack. This was run in a browser. It wasn't all that isolated, which meant that you had full access to the DOM. You couldn't really share add-ons between instances. So if you created an add-on on one instance, you couldn't use it on other instances. So imagine I had multiple across the company or around the world. You couldn't really share them. It kind of favored building monolithic apps. So everything was kind of stored on one server, which obviously, as you've seen all the presentations today, it's definitely not all that scalable to have one monolithic app. And the next thing is it didn't really help you write add-ons that were very resource intensive. So huge success, because everybody in the company now was writing add-ons, which is great. Even people who are non-hardcore developers were, which is exactly what we wanted to do. The second thing is, remember from prototyping, is you can actually use your add-on in the real product with zero setup costs. So we're basically testing ideas out way before writing 1,000 lines of code and making it robust and looking for all the edge cases. This allows us to really test your ideas ahead of time. And imagine the impact this has on scaling your teams. Imagine if your teams spent way more time testing out their ideas than they spent in the bowels of trying to figure out how to make every idea that you have right, scalable and runnable. So along comes the cloud, and what we wanted to do is take a lot of the learnings from Speakeasy, which is, how do we make this real now? Like, how do we actually make this so that we could put this in production, maybe share it with the whole world as well? So this is our wish list. we wanted to allow you to extend any product directly from the UI, so no need to install an IDE. Allow add-ons to be run remotely, as I mentioned earlier. We'd like the UI to be sandboxed. If you guys have been playing around with OAS.js or a lot of the iframing, you know it's not too safe to run just plain JavaScript in your product. We wanted them to be shared. You know, ideas that scale are ones that you can get a lot of feedback on, so sharing was super important, which is a lot of people have to have access to it and try it out. And again, we have to ship the IDE with the product. So this is what we called our unicorn. And you know, this is extensibility at scale. And I'm going to show you a little demo now. It's not that important what app I'm going to show this in, but I'm going to show how all of these concepts come together, and I'm going to show behind the scenes what kind of systems had to be put in place to make this happen. So the first thing is, in the RCP book, we actually used the chat application as the example app, and I'm going to use it here. So one of the first things that we do is we actually add extensibility directly inside a product. So I'm a huge fan of putting developer actions in the product. Why do you hide this behind documentation? Why do I have to go to the command line to do things? I want to be able to extend the product directly from within the product. Now, once you have an extend action within products, there's no reason why you can't open up the product and make it very developer friendly. So hey, why don't you put some extensions here? Why don't you create an add-on here? You know, a simple example is you can create a bot directly from the chat window at the bottom and say, hey, I want to put something in this chat. So you can click there and say, extend me, and you can start actually adding and extending the product. So this is the equivalent of Minecraft. You know, in my son's case, imagine opening Minecraft. He had a quick hotkey, and he could say, I want to create an add-on right on the spot. I want to create a new weapon. He probably wouldn't have had to talk to me if we had that kind of experience. So let's go and add a web panel to our app. Now, in the cloud, what's great is we've got all these web IDEs available at your fingerprints now. You don't actually have to ship with one yourself. So in our example, we had to ship. I think we built Ace, which is an open source editor that's behind Cloud9. So we had to ship with that. In this case, you don't have to ship with an editor anymore. What you can do is you can actually create skeletons. So remember, the wizard part is really important. You create a skeleton on the web. What's awesome as well is once this is in the web, you can actually bootstrap things really easily. So all those nifty IDs that you're always looking for, so what's that webhook URL that I've got to find, or what IDs do I have to look up, those can be pre-primed directly. And what's amazing is because once you know what product you're extending, your IDE can become really smart for you as well, is that it can know what your REST APIs are. It can know that, you know, in this case, this chat application is basically telling, as it's creating a skeleton, it's telling you that it's got this schema available. It's got these extension points that you can actually configure to. So as a developer, you don't have to go hunt around and figure out what all these REST APIs are for. And probably best of all is it's all in the cloud. Why not deploy this automatically? So there you have it. You've got an add-on that's been built. It's been served up in the cloud. In this case, off Bitbucket.io, it could be GitHub.io, it could be Dropbox, it could be served up from anywhere, and it could be shown in your app in an iframe directly. So that's the power of the cloud. And what's great is you can imagine forking this from the UI as well. You know, imagine having something that you love in one of your favorite projects and be able to just fork it right there and have the development environment set up and ready for you to run. So how does this happen behind the scenes? So we've taken some of our learnings around Speakies, which is basically a collection of open source tools, and we've been designing how you can think about building your apps in a different way. The most important thing is APIs are still super important. So whether it be webhook APIs or REST APIs, that's kind of the baseline. But what's more interesting is what you see up on the screen here is what the extend me module. So this is, I want you to think about how can I add code to my product that can create wizards automatically, can create skeletons of code, can make it easy for my developers to, you know, find what all the IDs are. So you're basically embedding into your product a way of other people to build add-ons on top of your product. The other thing is we're using web panels, so exposing iframes or using oasis.js to make it easy to actually embed into your product. And the most important thing as well is lifecycles. So lifecycles are things like allowing people to discover your add-ons directly within your product or within your application, administrating, and probably the most important thing that enables prototyping is allowing an add-on to actually be used by one user, a team, or a whole organization. So this is around scoping. So imagine on GitHub, for example, enabling a Git hook and enabling only for you for a while you're testing it, and then you can open it up and say, okay, I want that GitHub to be used, or that Git commit hook to be used for my whole organization, and expanding it. So having scoping is really important. It makes kind of the Pretotyping environment actually happen for real. So in that demo that you saw, basically what we did is the product itself went and told the web IDE how to create an add-on. It went and registered it in a catalog. So think of this as just an add-on repository that you can query. That, again, this is extending on our prototype example where it was all within one product. Imagine making it available to everyone. Installing it for a scope. So when you're creating an add-on for the first time, you just want to test it out yourself in the real product. And probably the most exciting part of all this is that add-on that you saw is 100% client-side. So there's actually no server running. It's all built with HTML5. The backend is Firebase, and it's just raw HTML and CSS that's running and using REST APIs. So there's no, I think in the day of age of the web now and web scale there's actually less and less reasons for you to actually have to write server code. What we found is the main reasons for server code is to do authentication, so to get a JWT token or to get an API token. So which is great now is you can have this whole developer flow without actually having to go deploy. Now, when do you actually go deploy? Well, it turns out you still have to deploy. You have to deploy if you're running any server-side extensive operations, or you want to share it with the marketplace. So what I'm super excited about this is no longer science fiction anymore. I think that 10 years ago it took 250 pages to explain how to get a development environment set up and be productive. And I think today it's all at our fingerprints to actually build this into your products from day one. It's not science fiction anymore. Google Docs released an add-on marketplace and an add-on framework for Google Docs probably a couple of weeks ago where you can go create add-ons directly for Google Docs without leaving your browser. So this is not science fiction. So if there's one takeaway that I want you to remember from this session, the first thing is for you to make this happen, every product that you build, you've got to think of it as a platform. And what that means is bring extensibility as a #1 concern. In the same way that risk is important, extensibility is as important. But the second thing is actually thinking of your platform as a product, which means don't only put your users first, but think of all those developers who are going to be using your product. Now, the power and what you have to remember is every one of you are only as good as the collection of developers. So there's communities out there like code.org who are basically training the next billion developers on the planet. And your team is only going to scale and be successful if you can make that next billion developers productive on your product. Thanks.